the better learning outcomes through proper methods of evaluation. So what I'm going to tell you in my 8 minutes of time is my experience in implementing practical implementation of proper assessment procedures for learning outcomes. It all started some 4 years back, if you remember. Actually, in the higher education sector, such a deep process of evaluation and assessment never existed. That is a fact. Other than the usual assessment process for the summative evaluation. And that was a rigid method, and still that is being followed. Then at a time, before the NEP came into existence, when NEP was before that, the Accreditation Council came up with a small segment of outcome analysis and the process that are being carried out by the higher education institutions for the accreditation as an accreditation tool. So in that context, that was the beginning of institutions to go after, especially in the state of Kerala, to come up with something, some methodology that can be employed for the assessing the learning outcomes. First thing which I have noted at that time, I selected nearly 20 colleges, and this happened some 6 months back because we were having that COVID breakdown. Nothing could be worked out. In the last 6 months, I observed nearly 20 colleges and some 5 or 6 schools. So what I observed in fact is, most of the institutions, especially affiliated colleges, if you keep about the engineering sector, including medical institutions, were not having proper stated learning outcomes of the institution. That is the first thing which I have noted. None of the institutions were having. And all of a sudden, when it became a necessary component in the accreditation, what actually people did was, without any expertise, everybody jumped learning outcomes and they started stating some 5 or 6 learning outcomes. That was the beginning of the entire problem. So in practical implementation, we found it very difficult because people were not aware. Exactly like what Dr. Vijay was pointing out, that none of our teachers were having any training at all with the learning. So what really happened was, the teachers were not aware of how to design the outcomes. And moreover, if you look deeper into the curricular framework of the stated outcomes, we can see many of the Kerala universities. I don't mean Kerala University, many of the universities in Kerala, their programs were not having outcomes stated. Then the institutions were forced to come out with their own statements. So really what happened was, the same affiliated syllabus was having different learning outcomes. Different institutions were having different learning outcomes for the same curricular framework. That is one thing which I have. The second thing is, although if you are having a stated set of outcomes, how actually that can be assessed? Teachers were not aware how the assessment process has to be carried out. So all through the last 1 or 2 years, what actually was going on, this assessment process was delegated to some other body of the institution, where they were carrying out the assessment process only for the sake of accreditation. This is the reality which I have seen. Of course, the colleges which I observed belonged to the range of some 300 candidates to more than 3,000 candidates. There are institutions I have seen where there is a solid mechanism where people are appointed only for the purpose. There are separate departments to look into such things. Whereas if you look into the profession, teaching profession of a teacher, you can see that 90 worksheets are allotted for that particular semester. And in these 20 institutions where I have observed, I have come across teachers who have spent more than 30 days for evaluation purpose, which is mandatory for the curriculum-based outcomes. So teachers are spending more than 35 to 40% on evaluation. And they are being burdened with additional learning outcomes which are beyond the curricular framework. That is in that if you look holistically, everything matters. So what's the first thing which I propose is there should be a proper charter of training for the teachers. How the process of assessment can be carried out, whatever may be the method. Then came the national education policy, which emphasized on this particular aspect, outcome-based education or learner outcome evaluation, in short. But after years, we do not have a common platform. There is no common roadmap. Even the state councils and individual institutions are coming, still today, are coming with their own methodology without a common platform. Of course, Professor was mentioning about CBSE and NCRT. Of course, because if you look into that segment, schools, you can find that the regulatory bodies, the centrally regulated bodies, they are coming up with new ideas and new methodologies. But what about the 80% of the state-run institutions, the schools? Whether the state councils or state regulatory bodies are coming up with such kind of new approaches, or are they merging with the state? Are they in collaboration with the central bodies to come up with a common platform? The very objective of the NEP, nothing of that sort is happening. So we have to come over to that particular level. All our teachers should be given proper training in the process of designing the learning outcomes and also in the process of evaluating or assessing the learning outcomes. Of course, we are following some methodology or the other today, but that is not up to the mark. The second thing is, in a broader way, the second thing is, what I feel is there should be some technology involved in the process of assessment. So what type of technology that has to do with that? The third thing is, the third one, the state council has to come up with a fixed roadmap when actually the process should be completed. Or the national regulatory body should come up and they should put common guidelines to every institution, that every institution should be having a stated set of outcomes, learning outcomes, and every university should revise the syllabus with stated outcomes for the program as well as for the courses. If you look into the autonomous sector, they are having all these inputs. But as far as the affiliated colleges are concerned, you see, for a particular program, we are having more than 100 or 125 colleges transacting the same syllabus in Mahatma Gandhi University, if you take the case of Kerala. And all these colleges, they are having different sets of outcomes, even for the same program. Why this has? Because the syllabus has not been revised so far. So that has to be taken into consideration. When CBSE is coming out with a holistic grade card or mindset evaluation, all these things are in place for our education sector also. But the problem is, it is not implemented in an affiliated institution. As far as an autonomous college, well and good, to a certain extent, these are being implemented. The last thing is, what I'm telling is, the state councils, the state-run councils and regulatory bodies should immediately find one way or the other to collaborate with the national body so that the national education policy which is in place and all these guidelines which has been put forward can be implemented smoothly in the state. Otherwise, what will happen is, without any solid roadmap or guideline, common guideline, we'll be proceeding like this. And after some time, the same thing will be repeated. And so far, what we have done is, we are finding a schedule, a charter, how to frame the learning outcomes by an institution, how to train the teachers. The next part is, are our teachers trained in their professional skills? When we talk about skill and competency, I have seen very good institutions coming out with competency assessment of the teachers. And even they have gone to the stage, gone to that level of having a skill inventory in the campus. Such a thing has never been discussed or never been dreamt of by other educational sector, by other education institutions in the state. So we have to reach that particular level if we want to improve in this assessment process. So things has to be done a lot. Many things can be discussed, but ultimately when it comes to an implementation state, we are a failure. That is exactly what I have found. Things have to change. I appreciate Rajagiri for taking up this particular issue. What you have to do is you have to come out in a broader sense so that the exact problem that lies within the affiliated system of the higher education has to be forward with the authorities and some solid mechanism has to be.